My grandmother's will reading was supposed to be private, but the lawyer accidentally sent me the real version first. I was 23, sitting in my cramped studio apartment eating ramen for the fourth night straight, when the email arrived from Whitmore & Associates. The subject line read, "Confidential, estate documents for Vivian Blackwood." Grandma Vivian had died 3 weeks earlier. Cancer, they said. Quick and peaceful. I'd been her favorite grandchild, the only one who visited her every Sunday, who listened to her stories about the old country, who didn't roll my eyes when she talked about family curses and blood debts. While my cousins called her crazy behind her back, I genuinely enjoyed our conversations. She'd make tea in her antique china cups and tell me about our ancestors, about old traditions, about things that went bump in the night. "The world is stranger than people want to believe, Delilah," she'd always say, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup. "Our family has seen things, done things, that would make normal folks run screaming." I'd always assumed she was just eccentric. Old people got like that sometimes, mixing reality with imagination. But now, staring at my laptop screen in my tiny apartment with its peeling wallpaper and broken heating, I was beginning to understand that maybe Grandma hadn't been as crazy as everyone thought. I opened the attachment expecting the usual legal jargon about her modest savings and the old Victorian house she'd left me. The house had been in our family for generations, and everyone assumed it would go to me since I was the only grandchild who actually visited. My mother had been dropping hints for months about how I could finally move out of this dump and have a real home. Instead, I found something that made my blood freeze. Final will and testament, actual version, do not send to family. My hands shook as I scrolled down. The first page looked normal enough. Standard legal language about being of sound mind and body, revoking all previous wills, the usual stuff. Then I reached the section titled, Special Bequests and Confessions. To my granddaughter Delilah Rose Blackwood, I leave not only my house at 1247 Morning Street, but also the responsibility of maintaining our family's most sacred duty. In the basement, behind the false wall marked with the raven symbol, you'll find them. 7 urns, 7 souls, 7 debts that must be paid monthly for as long as our bloodline exists. My laptop screen blurred as tears I didn't realize I was crying clouded my vision. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Maybe one of my cousins had hacked into the lawyer's system as some twisted prank. Lysander had always been jealous that Grandma favored me, but I kept reading, unable to stop myself. Each month, on the new moon, you must feed them. 1 cup of blood from the living, 1 lock of hair from the willing, 1 tear from the grieving. The ritual must be performed in the basement chamber at exactly midnight. If you fail even once, they will be released, and our family line will suffer for 7 generations. This is why your grandfather never came home from the war. He was the keeper before me, and when he left for overseas, I was too young to take over. The binding weakened. This is why your uncle died in that car accident when he was only 19. This is why your mother can't have children after you, despite trying for 20 years. The room spun around me. I had to grip the edges of my desk to keep from falling off my chair. My mother had never told me she'd been trying to have more children. I'd always assumed I was an only child by choice, not by some supernatural curse. I kept reading, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. The lawyer has been instructed to give you a sanitized version that mentions only the house and modest savings. He doesn't know about the basement. He doesn't know about the responsibility I'm passing to you. But you need to know the truth before the fake reading tomorrow. You need to understand what you're inheriting. The document continued with details that made my skin crawl. Feeding times, always at midnight on the new moon. Specific incantations that had to be spoken in what looked like Latin mixed with something much older. Instructions on how to recognize if the containment was weakening, what to do if one of the souls escaped. And photographs. Dozens of Polaroids of 7 ancient urns, each carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Each urn had a nameplate beneath it in the photos. Matthias the Strangler, died 1823. Elena the Poisoner, died 1834. Willem the Drowner, died 1841, and 4 others whose names were harder to read in the dim lighting of the photos. Below each photo was a handwritten description of their crimes and how they'd died. Matthias had killed 12 children in a London workhouse before being hanged. Elena had poisoned 3 husbands and a dozen rivals before drinking her own concoctions. Willem had drowned entire families by sabotaging their boats, claiming their souls for some dark master. These 7 souls were bound to our family in 1847 by your great-great-grandmother Cordelia Blackwood. She made a pact with an entity that dwells in the marsh behind our property. Her husband was dying of consumption, her children were starving, and winter was killing everything. The entity offered her a bargain, prosperity and protection for her bloodline in exchange for eternal service as guardians of these 7 murderers' souls. I had to stop reading to run to the bathroom and throw up. When I came back, wiping my mouth with a shaky hand, I forced myself to continue. Cordelia agreed. The entity gave her these 7 souls, murder victims from the old country, bound to urns made from their own bones. As long as someone from our family feeds them monthly and keeps them contained, our line would be blessed with good fortune, wealth, health, protection from harm, success in all endeavors. But if the ritual is ever broken, if the souls are released, they will hunt down every living descendant and drag them back to serve the entity in the marsh forever. I have been the keeper for 43 years since I was 22 years old. My mother did it for 37 years before me. Her grandmother did it for 29 years before her. The house ages you, Delilah. The constant proximity to those trapped souls drains the life from you slowly. This is why I look older than my years. This is why I never traveled, never remarried after your grandfather disappeared. This is why every keeper in our family has died before age 60. My phone rang, making me jump so hard I nearly threw the laptop across the room. The caller ID showed my mother's number. Delilah? Her voice sounded strained, worried. I just got the strangest call from that lawyer. He said there was some confusion about Grandma's will and wanted to confirm your address for tomorrow's reading. Did you receive anything early by mistake? I stared at the laptop screen, at the words that were rewriting my entire understanding of my family, our history, my future. No, I lied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Nothing yet. Good. I was worried there might be some clerical error. You know how these old lawyers can be with technology. She paused. Are you okay, honey? You sound strange. Just tired. Long day at work. Well, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be emotional enough without you being exhausted. After she hung up, I returned to the document. The next section was labeled Instructions for the New Keeper and contained detailed diagrams of the basement layout, the ritual chamber, the feeding ceremony. There were warnings about never trying to communicate with the souls, never attempting to open the urns, never staying away from the house for more than 6 days. If you leave for longer than a week, the entity will begin calling you back. The compulsion starts as a gentle pull, a homesickness you can't shake. By day 5, it becomes physical pain. By day 6, you'll be in agony. By day 7, you'll either return willingly or the entity will drag you back itself. The final section was a personal letter addressed directly to me. My dearest Delilah, if you're reading this, then my time as keeper has ended and yours must begin. I know this seems impossible, terrifying, insane. I felt the same way when my mother left me this burden at age 25. I raged against it, denied it, tried to run from it 3 separate times. The entity brought me back each time, and the punishment grew worse. The first time I tried to leave, I made it to Chicago before the pain became unbearable. I came back after 4 days thinking I could just visit the house briefly and then leave again. But once you accept the role of keeper, the house doesn't let go easily. The second time, I tried to bring your grandfather with me. We packed everything and drove to California, thinking distance would break whatever hold the house had on me. We lasted 6 days before I collapsed. Your grandfather carried me back, and that's when the entity marked him. 2 weeks later, he was drafted. He never came home from overseas. The third time, I tried to destroy everything. I brought gasoline and matches to the basement, determined to burn the whole place down and end the cycle forever. But when I reached for the first urn, something happened. I saw what would happen if I succeeded. I saw our entire family line. You, your mother, your cousins, everyone, dying in horrible accidents within the year. The entity showed me exactly how each death would occur. So I put down the matches and accepted my fate. You have 3 choices, and each one comes with consequences. First, you can burn this will, pretend you never saw it, and attend tomorrow's fake reading. You'll walk away with nothing, but you'll also walk away free. The sanitized will only mentions a small inheritance and some personal effects. Eventually, someone else in the family will discover the truth when the protection starts failing and strange things begin happening. It might be your mother, your cousin Lysander, or some future grandchild born decades from now. But it won't be you. You can live a normal life, have a family, travel the world, do whatever you want. The price is that someone else will eventually pay for your freedom. Second, you can try to break the binding entirely. I've researched this option for decades. It requires destroying all 7 urns simultaneously, while performing a specific counter ritual during a total solar eclipse. The next eclipse visible from our location won't occur for 37 years in 2062. If you succeed, our family will be free forever. But if you fail, if even 1 urn remains intact, every person with Blackwood blood will die within a year. Every single one. The entity will make sure of it. Third, you can accept the responsibility and become the new keeper. The house will provide for you. You'll never want for money, food, or shelter. The family blessing will continue. Protection from harm, success in endeavors, good health for everyone except yourself. But you'll also never truly be free. As I mentioned, the longest any keeper has lived away from the house is 6 days. After that, the entity starts calling you back with increasing force. I chose the third option because I was young and afraid, and couldn't bear the thought of condemning my entire family. I've regretted it every day since. But I've also protected everyone I love for 4 decades. Your cousin Lysander graduated from Harvard Medical School. Your mother has lived a long, healthy life despite her fertility struggles being supernaturally imposed. You've been safe, successful, and happy your entire life because of the protection the entity provides. The choice is yours, but know that if you accept, there are strict rules that cannot be broken. Never let anyone else enter the basement chamber. The souls will try to possess them. Never miss a feeding. Even one missed ritual weakens the binding significantly. Never try to communicate with the souls. They are master manipulators and will promise you anything to be released. Never leave the house empty for more than 6 days. The entity considers abandonment a breach of contract. Never try to research the entity itself. Some knowledge is too dangerous. And never, ever try to open the urns. The souls inside are not fully contained. They're compressed, concentrated evil. Opening even one would release something that could devastate an entire city. If you accept this duty, there will be a key taped under the kitchen sink in a small magnetic box. The basement door is hidden behind the bookshelf in the study. Press on the spine of Paradise Lost on the 3rd shelf from the top, and the entire bookcase will swing inward on hidden hinges. The first feeding is due on the new moon, which is in 5 days. I timed my death carefully to give you time to decide and prepare. The ritual supplies are kept in a locked cabinet in the basement chamber. The key to that cabinet is hidden inside the old music box on my bedroom dresser, the one that plays for Elise. Wind it up and let it play completely through. When the music stops, press down on the dancing ballerina figure and the bottom will open. Inside the cabinet, you'll find silver bowls for the blood, a ceremonial knife that's been blessed to cause minimal pain, vials for tears, and pouches for hair. There are also detailed instructions for the incantations and timing. I love you, child. I'm sorry this burden has fallen to you. I'm sorry I couldn't find another way. I'm sorry for all the secrets, all the lies, all the years I spent preparing you for this without you knowing. But I'm also proud of you. You're stronger than you know, braver than you realize, and more capable than you believe. If you choose to accept this responsibility, you won't be alone. Every keeper before you has left guidance in the journals hidden throughout the house. We've all faced the same struggles, the same temptations, the same despair. You'll find comfort in our shared experience. If you choose differently, I understand. I won't blame you. I'll love you regardless. But please, whatever you decide, don't take too long. The entity grows restless when there's no keeper, and restless entities do unpredictable things. With all my love and deepest regrets, Grandmother Vivian P.S. If you choose to become keeper, burn the fake will after tomorrow's reading. And whatever you do, don't let that lawyer know what you really inherited. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned and my vision blurred. Outside my apartment window, the city continued its normal rhythm, cars honking, people walking, life proceeding as if the entire universe hadn't just tilted on its axis. But as I sat there in my tiny apartment with its broken heating and peeling wallpaper, I began to remember things. Strange things that had never quite made sense before. How Grandma's house always felt different from other places. Not just old or creaky, but alive somehow. Watching, waiting. How the temperature always dropped at least 10 degrees when you entered her basement, even in summer. How she never let anyone go down there alone, always claiming the stairs were unsafe or the lighting was poor. How she'd disappear every month for an entire night, claiming she was visiting friends. But all her friends had died years ago. My mother and I had always assumed she was visiting their graves, processing her grief in private. How our family had an unusually high rate of accidents, diseases, and early deaths, but only among the older generations. My generation and my mother's had been strangely blessed. Good health, good luck, good opportunities that seemed to fall into our laps. How my mother had suffered 7 miscarriages after having me, each one more devastating than the last. The doctors could never explain it. Everything looked normal, healthy, viable. Then something would just go wrong. How my cousin Tobias had died in his sleep at age 12 with no medical explanation. One night he was fine, playing video games and complaining about homework. The next morning, he was gone. The autopsy showed nothing unusual. How every family photo older than 50 years showed relatives with the same haunted, exhausted expression Grandma always wore. A look of bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical age. I spent the rest of the night reading and rereading the will, cross-referencing details with family stories I remembered. Everything fit. Every unexplained death, every mysterious illness, every stroke of good fortune for those who stayed away from the house. At 3 a.m., I finally closed the laptop and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those urns. 7 bone-white containers holding compressed evil, humming with malevolent energy in a basement chamber I'd never known existed. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Grandma's house for the first time since her funeral. It looked exactly the same. Gray Victorian with peeling paint, overgrown garden, windows that seemed to watch you approach. But now I saw it differently. Not as the cozy family home where I'd spent countless Sunday afternoons, but as a prison. A beautiful, well-appointed prison that had held 3 generations of women hostage. I had the key from Grandma's purse, the one I'd used every Sunday for years to let myself in for our visits. But the house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Colder, despite the warm spring weather. More alive somehow, as if it had been waiting for me. I went straight to the study and found the bookshelf Grandma had mentioned. When I pressed on the spine of Paradise Lost, it clicked softly, and the entire bookcase swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The temperature dropped 20 degrees as I walked down those stairs. My breath came out in visible puffs. At the bottom was a heavy wooden door marked with a carved raven symbol, just like the will had described. Beyond it was a small stone chamber with 7 pedestals arranged in a perfect circle. On each pedestal sat an urn exactly like the ones in the photographs. They were humming, not audibly, but I could feel the vibration in my bones, in my teeth, in the deepest parts of my skull. 7 different frequencies creating a harmony that made my entire nervous system feel like it was being tuned like an instrument. The urns themselves were beautiful in a horrible way. Polished bone carved with intricate symbols, each one slightly different in size and shape depending on the soul contained within. As I stood there in that freezing chamber, I could swear I heard whispers. Voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. Pleading, threatening, promising things I couldn't quite understand, but that made my skin crawl nonetheless. I ran back upstairs and called the lawyer's office, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. Mr. Whitmore, this is Delilah Blackwood. About tomorrow's will reading, I need to know something. Did you send me any documents early by mistake? Silence on the other end. Then, Miss Blackwood, I'm not sure what you mean. All documents are being held secure until tomorrow's appointment. We have very strict protocols about estate communications. Why do you ask? I received an email from your office yesterday with what appeared to be my grandmother's will. More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was sharp with concern. That's impossible. I handle all estate communications personally. and I haven't sent anything to anyone. Our system logs every email, and there's no record of any communication with your address. Can you forward me what you received immediately? My blood turned to ice. I'll bring it tomorrow. Miss Blackwood, if someone is impersonating our firm or attempting to defraud you, I hung up and raced back to my apartment. With trembling fingers, I opened my laptop and checked the email again. The sender was listed as V. Blackwood, 1847 at witchinghour.net. V. Blackwood. Vivian Blackwood. The year Cordelia made the deal. Grandma had sent me the email herself, from beyond the grave. I scrolled down to the bottom of the message and found something I'd missed before, a timestamp showing when the email had been composed. It was dated 3 weeks ago, the exact day Grandma had died. She'd written this email on her deathbed, somehow programming it to send after the lawyer received the official paperwork. She'd wanted to make sure I knew the truth before I had to choose. That evening, my mother called again. "I've been thinking about Grandma's house," she said, her voice strange and distant. "Maybe you shouldn't inherit it. That place always gave me the creeps. Too many bad memories." "What kind of bad memories?" "Oh, you know, family members dying young, strange accidents, your grandfather vanishing during the war." She paused and I could hear her lighting a cigarette, a habit she'd supposedly quit years ago. "Did you know Grandma's mother died at 46? And her grandmother at 38? The women in our family don't seem to live very long if they stay in that house. But Grandma lived to 71. Did she? She looked 90 by the time she died. And she never left that place. Not once in 40 years. Never traveled, never dated after Grandpa disappeared, never did anything but sit in that house and waste away." After she hung up, I spent the night researching our family genealogy online. She was right. For over a century, every woman who'd lived in that house had died before age 60. Most died between 45 and 50, their death certificates listing various causes: heart failure, stroke, cancer, mysterious illnesses the doctors couldn't explain. But their children, the ones who moved away, lived normal lifespans, good lives, successful careers, happy marriages, healthy families. The keepers aged faster. The house drained them, but it protected everyone else. The next day, I sat in Mr. Whitmore's stuffy office with my mother and cousin Lysander, listening to the fake will reading. It was exactly as Grandma had predicted. House to me, modest savings split between my mother and cousin, personal effects divided among family. Everyone seemed satisfied with the arrangements. Lysander made jokes about me finally having a place bigger than a shoebox. My mother worried about the upkeep costs and property taxes. Mr. Whitmore handed me keys and deed paperwork with a professional smile. "Your grandmother was very specific about wanting you to have the house," he said. "She felt you appreciated its history more than anyone else in the family." I signed the papers with shaking hands, knowing I was signing my life away regardless of which version of the will I chose to honor. That night, I stood in Grandma's kitchen with both wills printed out, the fake one in my left hand, the real one in my right. Outside, storm clouds gathered, and the wind howled through the old windows like something desperate to get inside. I thought about my mother, who'd been trying to have another baby for 20 years, whose miscarriages had left her hollow and broken. I thought about my cousin Lysander, who just started his surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, whose hands would save countless lives. I thought about future children who'd be born into safety and prosperity, because someone maintained the binding. I also thought about living alone in this house for the next 30 years, aging rapidly, never traveling more than an hour away, feeding blood to ancient murderers once a month while they whispered promises and threats into my dreams. I was 23. I could have a whole life ahead of me. Marriage, children, a career that meant something. I could see the world, fall in love, grow old naturally surrounded by people who cared about me. Or I could protect my family like Grandma had protected me. I lit a match. The fake will caught fire first. I watched it burn in the kitchen sink until nothing remained but ash, then held the flame to the real will. At the last second, I pulled it away. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it yet. Instead, I walked to the study, pressed on the spine of Paradise Lost, and descended into the basement with my first offering. I'd stopped at the drugstore on the way over and bought a small sewing kit, a plastic cup, and a pair of nail scissors. Following the instructions in Grandma's letter, I went to her bedroom and found the music box. When I wound it up and let For Elise play through completely, pressing down on the ballerina revealed a hidden compartment containing an old brass key. In the basement chamber, the key opened a cabinet built into the stone wall. Inside were silver bowls, a ceremonial knife with an ivory handle, small glass vials, and leather pouches. Everything was clean and well-maintained, ready for immediate use. The ritual itself was simpler than I'd expected. I pricked my finger with the ceremonial knife and let 7 drops of blood fall into the silver bowl. I cut a lock of my own hair with the nail scissors and placed it in one of the leather pouches. And I cried, genuine tears of grief for Grandma, for myself, for the life I was giving up, catching them in one of the glass vials. 1 cup of blood from the living, 1 lock of hair from the willing, 1 tear from the grieving. I set the offerings on the floor in the center of the 7 urns and spoke the words Grandma had written down for me. Ancient ones, bound by bone and blood, accept this offering. Grant protection to the Blackwood line. Keep the bargain made in darkness, sealed in sorrow, paid in sacrifice. The humming stopped. For one terrifying moment, the basement was completely silent. Then a wind that couldn't exist underground swept through the chamber, extinguishing my flashlight and plunging me into absolute darkness. The silver bowl rattled against the stone floor. Something touched my face, cold fingers trailing across my cheek like a caress. A voice whispered directly into my ear, "Welcome, Keeper. When I finally found the strength to turn my flashlight back on, the bowl was empty. The hair was gone. The vial had been drained. But the urns were still there, still humming their bone-deep harmony, somehow seeming more satisfied than before. I climbed back upstairs on unsteady legs, locked the basement door, and pushed the bookshelf back into place. That was 6 months ago. I've performed the ritual 5 times now. Each month, it gets a little easier. The voices whisper to me sometimes when I'm alone in the house, but I've learned not to listen. They promise me things: freedom, power, revenge against those who wronged me. They describe the outside world in vivid detail, trying to make me homesick for a life I can never have again. But I've also felt the house's protection. The job interview that led to a promotion I didn't deserve. The car accident I walked away from without a scratch, when the vehicle was completely destroyed. The test results that came back clear when the shadows on the x-rays suggested something terrible. My mother got pregnant last month, at 44, after 2 decades of trying and failing. The doctors call it a miracle. I know it's the entity keeping its end of the bargain. Lysander was accepted into the most competitive surgical program in the country, despite having average grades and no connections. Opportunities keep falling into his lap like gifts from heaven. Our entire family is thriving. But I've also noticed changes in myself. Gray hairs at 24. Lines around my eyes that weren't there 6 months ago. A weariness that sleep can't cure. Joint pain that has no medical explanation. When I look in the mirror now, I see the beginnings of that same haunted expression Grandma always wore. I found her journals hidden throughout the house just as she'd promised. 43 years of entries describing the slow erosion of hope, the gradual acceptance of a life lived in service to something ancient and terrible. The earliest entries are full of rage and defiance. The later ones read like resignation letters written to God. She tried to escape dozens of times in the first few years. The entity always brought her back, and the punishments grew worse each time. Physical pain, nightmares that lasted for days, visions of family members dying in horrible accidents if she didn't return immediately. Eventually, she stopped trying. Sometimes I research eclipse dates and wonder if I could gather the courage to try breaking the binding in 31 years. Other times I think about the cousin who'll inherit this responsibility when I die, and I feel guilty for even considering it. But mostly, I just take it one new moon at a time. Last week, I received another email from an address I didn't recognize. Future.keeper, 2057 on witchinghour.net. The subject line read, "Thank you." Inside was a longer message. "Dear Aunt Delilah, because of your sacrifice, I will be born. Because of your choice, I will grow up safe and protected. I know you don't know me yet, but someday you'll watch me take my first steps. Help me with homework. Teach me about our family's real history. When my time comes to choose, I'll think of you and how brave you were. Thank you for giving me a chance at life." I deleted the email immediately and tried not to think about it. But sometimes, late at night when the urns are humming their lullaby in the basement below, I wonder who sent it. Some future niece or nephew, reaching back through time to thank me for a sacrifice I'm still making? Or something else entirely, wearing the face of family to keep me compliant? The entity's grandma warned about knowing too much about. I've started researching it anyway. In the town library's oldest records, I found references to something called the Marsh Walker, that supposedly lived in the wetlands behind our property, before they were drained and developed. The earliest settlers wrote about strange lights in the marsh, about people who went missing on foggy nights, about bargains made with things that weren't quite human. Cordelia wasn't the first to make a deal. She was just the first to make one that lasted. The other families who tried similar bargains all died out within a generation or two. Their keepers went insane, or tried to break the binding prematurely, or simply refused to continue. Only the Blackwoods have lasted over a century and a half. Maybe we're stronger than the others were. Maybe we're just more afraid. I wonder if, someday, I'll be the one sending emails to my granddaughter, trying to prepare her for the choice I made. The choice that saved our family, the choice that cost me everything, the choice I'd make again, every single time, because that's what love really means sometimes. Not grand gestures or romantic declarations, but quiet sacrifices made in basement chambers while ancient evil hums its approval. The choice to give up your own happiness so the people you care about can have theirs. The choice to become a guardian instead of living as yourself. The choice that defines not just your life, but your death, and every moment in between. I made that choice 6 months ago, and I'll keep making it every new moon for the rest of my life, however long that might be. My high school bully said I'd die alone and forgotten, so I married his father and became his stepmother. Tyler Morrison made my junior year hell. Every day he'd corner me by my locker with his crew, calling me freak girl because I read during lunch instead of gossiping about boys. He'd knock my books out of my hands, trip me in the hallways, and make loud comments about my clothes whenever I walked past his table. The worst incident happened during homecoming week. I was sitting alone in the cafeteria trying to finish my chemistry homework when Tyler suddenly stood up on his chair. The entire room went quiet as he pointed directly at me. "Look at Sarah Chen over there," he announced loudly. "Eating lunch alone again, doing homework like the pathetic loser she is. I bet she's so weird that she'll probably die alone and forgotten in some cat-filled apartment someday." The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Even the teachers pretended not to hear. I felt my face burn with humiliation as 300 pairs of eyes stared at me. Some kids started making meowing sounds. Others whispered and pointed. I gathered my things and ran to the bathroom where I stayed until the bell rang. That night, I went home and cried into my pillow until my eyes were swollen shut. But something shifted in me that day. Instead of breaking completely, I got angry, really angry. I started working out religiously, studying harder than ever, and planning my escape from that small-minded town where Tyler Morrison was considered cool. 10 years later, I was living in Chicago as a successful marketing director. I'd built a life Tyler could never imagine, traveling internationally for work, owning a downtown condo with city views, dating interesting people who appreciated my intelligence. I'd completely forgotten about him and his cruel prediction until I literally ran into his father at a coffee shop. David Morrison was nothing like his son. At 52, he was distinguished, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. When my latte lid popped off and spilled all over his morning newspaper, he laughed warmly and offered to buy me another. "I'm David," he said, extending his hand with a genuine smile. "Sarah," I replied, not making any connection yet. We talked for 2 hours about everything: books, travel, architecture, life philosophy. He was recently divorced, worked as an architect, and had this gentle way of listening that made me feel truly heard. When he asked for my number, I gave it without any hesitation. Our first date was dinner at a quiet Italian place downtown. David was fascinating. Well-traveled, emotionally intelligent, funny in a dry way that reminded me of my favorite professors. Everything his son wasn't. "I have to ask," I said over dessert. "Do you have children?" His face darkened slightly. "One son. We're not particularly close. He struggled with some personal issues over the years." I nodded sympathetically, still completely unaware of the connection. 6 months later, David proposed with a vintage Art Deco ring that was exactly what I would have chosen for myself. I said yes immediately, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. We planned a small ceremony at his house. A beautiful Victorian, he'd restored himself with incredible attention to detail. The morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready in his antique mirror, David casually mentioned his son might stop by. "Tyler's been asking to meet you," he said, adjusting his tie. I thought today might be the perfect opportunity. My blood turned to ice water. The name Tyler Morrison hadn't crossed my mind in months, but hearing it on my wedding day made my stomach drop. I sat down heavily on David's antique vanity chair, staring at my reflection in my wedding dress. "Sarah, are you all right?" David asked, concern creeping into his voice. I turned to face my soon-to-be husband, this kind, gentle man who had no idea what his son had put me through. "David, what's Tyler's middle name?" "James. Tyler James Morrison." "Why?" My high school yearbook flashed through my mind. Tyler J. Morrison, class clown, most likely to peak in high school. The same Tyler who had systematically destroyed my self-esteem for 2 years. "Nothing," I lied. "Just curious." The ceremony was perfect. David's eyes filled with tears as I walked down the makeshift aisle in his living room. Our friends and family watched as we exchanged vows in front of the fireplace he'd built with his own hands. When he kissed me, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Until the front door opened during our first dance. Tyler Morrison walked in looking exactly like I remembered, just softer around the edges. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, still in David's arms. I watched the recognition dawn on his face, followed immediately by horror. "Dad?" Tyler's voice cracked. "What the hell is going on?" David released me and turned toward his son. "Tyler, you made it. I'd like you to meet my wife, Sarah." Tyler's mouth fell open. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Sarah? Sarah Chen? Morrison now," I said, extending my hand with a smile that could cut glass. "Nice to see you again, Tyler." The room went silent. Our guests sensed the tension but couldn't understand it. David looked between us, confused. "You two know each other?" David asked. "We went to high school together," I said smoothly. "Different social circles, but you know how it is in small towns." Tyler's face had gone pale. "Dad, can I talk to you privately?" "After the reception," David said firmly. "This is our wedding day." For the next 3 hours, I watched Tyler squirm. He tried to avoid me, but at every turn, I was there. When he went to get a drink, I was at the bar. When he stepped outside for air, I followed. "This is insane," he whispered when we were alone on the back patio. "You married my father?" "I married a wonderful man who happened to be your father," I corrected. Though I have to say, the apple fell very far from the tree. Tyler ran his hands through his hair. "Sarah, look, about high school." "About high school what?" I interrupted. "About how you made my life miserable? About how you convinced everyone I was worthless? About how you stood up in front of everyone and said I'd die alone and forgotten?" He winced. "I was a kid. I was stupid. You were cruel," I said evenly. "But don't worry. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I love your father. The fact that this drives you crazy is just a bonus." Tyler stared at me. "He doesn't know, does he? About what I did to you?" "No," I said, "and I don't plan to tell him. David loves you despite your flaws, and I won't be the one to destroy that relationship. But understand this. I'm not the scared 16-year-old you used to torment. I'm your stepmother now, and you will treat me with respect." The color drained from his face completely. When we returned to the reception, Tyler made his excuses and left. David was disappointed but not surprised. "He'll come around," David said, pulling me close. "He just needs time to adjust." Over the next few months, Tyler avoided family gatherings. David would call him, but Tyler always had excuses. Work was busy. He wasn't feeling well. His car was in the shop. I don't understand what's gotten into him, David confided one evening over dinner. Ever since our wedding, he's been distant. I reached across the table and took his hand. Maybe he's just processing the changes. It can't be easy seeing your parent with someone new. David squeezed my fingers. You're probably right. I just wish he'd give you a chance. I know you two would get along if he'd let you. If only he knew. The first major holiday was Thanksgiving. David insisted Tyler come, and for once, Tyler couldn't find an excuse. He arrived looking like he was attending his own funeral. Throughout dinner, Tyler was polite but strained. He called me Sarah instead of avoiding my name entirely, answered when I asked him direct questions, and even helped clear the table. But I could see the effort it took. After dinner, while David was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, Tyler cornered me in the dining room. "This is so messed up," he said in a low voice. "Every time I see you, all I can think about is what a piece of shit I was in high school." "Good," I said, continuing to stack plates. "You should think about that." "Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve it, but can we just start over? For my dad's sake?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He was 32 now, and life had clearly humbled him. He worked as a mechanic, lived in a small apartment, and from what David had told me, struggled with depression and anxiety. He wasn't the confident bully who had made my life hell anymore. "I don't need an apology, Tyler," I said finally. "I don't need closure or forgiveness or any of that therapeutic nonsense. What I need is for you to be a good son to your father, because he loves you more than you probably deserve." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I know he does, and I know I've been letting him down. So stop," I said simply. "Stop making this about us and make it about him." From that day forward, something shifted. Tyler started calling David more often. He showed up for family dinners. He even brought a girlfriend around Christmas, a sweet teacher named Rebecca who clearly adored him. But the real test came 6 months later, when David had a mild heart attack. I was at the hospital within minutes of getting the call, still in my work clothes, frantically trying to reach Tyler. When he finally arrived, his eyes were red and panicked. "How is he?" Tyler asked the moment he saw me. "Stable," I said. "The doctor said it was minor, but they want to keep him overnight for observation." We sat together in the waiting room for hours. Tyler kept apologizing for taking so long to get there, for not being a better son, for not calling enough. I finally told him to shut up. "Your father knows you love him," I said. "That's all that matters." When David was finally awake and receiving visitors, Tyler broke down completely. He told his father everything, how sorry he was for being distant, how much he loved him, how grateful he was to have him in his life. Later, as Tyler was leaving, he stopped by my chair. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For making him happy, for being here when he needed you, for," he paused, struggling with the words, "for being better than I ever was." 2 years into my marriage, Tyler and Rebecca got engaged. At their engagement party, Tyler stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady. "But most of all, I want to thank my dad for teaching me what real love looks like, and Sarah for showing me what grace looks like." He raised his glass and looked directly at me. "Sarah, when we were younger, I said some terrible things to you, things I've regretted every day since. You could have held on to that anger, could have made this family impossible, but instead, you chose kindness. You chose to love my father, and by extension, you chose to love me despite everything. I don't deserve that kind of grace, but I'm grateful for it." The room was quiet. David looked confused but proud. I felt tears prick my eyes. "To second chances," Tyler said, "and the people who give them to us." Everyone raised their glasses and drank. After the party, David pulled me aside. "What was Tyler talking about? About saying terrible things to you?" I thought about lying, about protecting Tyler's secret forever. But David deserved the truth. "High school wasn't easy for me," I said carefully. "Tyler was part of a group that made things difficult. But people change, David. The man who toasted me tonight isn't the boy who hurt me 15 years ago." David's face darkened. "He bullied you? My son bullied you?" "He was a teenager," I said quickly. "A hurt, confused teenager who probably needed help he wasn't getting. Look at him now. Look at the man he's become. That's what matters." David was quiet for a long time. "Did you know who he was when we met?" "No," I said honestly. "I had no idea you were his father until our wedding day." "And you stayed anyway?" I took his hands. "David, I fell in love with you. Not despite your son, but including him. Tyler is part of who you are, and I chose all of you." 3 months later, Tyler asked if he could take me to lunch. Just the two of us. We went to the same coffee shop where David and I had first met. Tyler ordered for both of us. He remembered that I liked oat milk lattes. "I need to tell you something," he said once we were seated. "I've been going to therapy." "That's great, Tyler. I've been talking about high school, about what I did to you and other kids, about why I did it." He stared into his coffee. "My therapist says I was acting out because of my parents' divorce, because I felt powerless, because I was hurting. But that doesn't excuse it." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. I want to make amends," he said. "Real amends. Not just to you, but to everyone I hurt. I studied his face. He was serious, determined in a way I'd never seen before. What does that look like? I asked. I've been reaching out to people from our class, apologizing. Some of them won't talk to me, and I understand that. But some have, and it's been healing. He pulled out his phone and showed me a message thread. Names I recognized from high school, people Tyler had targeted. Some had responded with anger, others with acceptance, a few with their own apologies for standing by and doing nothing. I saved you for last, he said, because what I did to you was the worst, and because you're family now. I was quiet for a long time, processing what he was asking of me. Tyler, I said finally, I don't need your apology to move forward. I've already done that work. I know, he said, but I need to give it anyway. He took a deep breath and looked directly into my eyes. Sarah, I am profoundly sorry for what I did to you in high school. I was cruel, and I was wrong, and I caused you real pain. There's no excuse for my behavior, and I don't expect your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see the incredible woman you are, the way you love my father, the grace you've shown our family. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it, and I'm sorry for every day I made you feel less than the amazing person you are. I felt tears streaming down my face before I realized I was crying. Thank you, I whispered. We sat in silence for a while, both of us emotional. Can I ask you something? Tyler said eventually. I nodded. Do you think Dad would be proud of me? If he knew the whole story, would he be proud of how I'm trying to change? I thought about David, the man who saw the best in everyone, who believed in second chances, who had raised a son despite his own struggles. I think, I said carefully, that your father would be proud of the man you're becoming. Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying to be better. Tyler smiled through his tears. I really love him, you know, and I really love that he found you. I love him too, I said. And Tyler, I'm proud of you too. When I got home that evening, David was in his workshop, building a bookshelf for our bedroom. I told him about lunch, about Tyler's therapy, about his apologies to our former classmates. I had no idea he was struggling so much back then, David said, setting down his chisel. I was so wrapped up in the divorce, in my own pain. I failed him. You didn't fail him, I said firmly. You were dealing with your own trauma. And look at him now. He's taking responsibility, doing the work, becoming the man you raised him to be. David pulled me into his arms. How did I get so lucky? First, Tyler turns his life around, and then I get to marry the most incredible woman I've ever met. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said, kissing his cheek. We chose each other. All of us. Last month, Tyler and Rebecca got married. Tyler asked me to walk him down the aisle since his mother lived across the country and they weren't close. Are you sure? I asked when he called with the request. Absolutely, he said. You're the reason I believe in redemption. You're the reason I know people can change. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have by my side. On his wedding day, as we stood at the back of the church waiting for our cue, Tyler turned to me. I used to think about that day in the cafeteria sometimes, he said quietly, about what I said to you, and I'd wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been kinder. Don't torture yourself with hypotheticals, I said, adjusting his boutonniere. I'm not, he said, smiling. I'm just grateful that despite everything, we ended up as family. The music started and we walked down the aisle together. David beamed at us from the front row, tears in his eyes as he watched his son and his wife approach the altar together. During the reception, David and I danced to At Last by Etta James. As he spun me around, I caught sight of Tyler and Rebecca at their sweetheart table, laughing at something Rebecca's little nephew had said. What are you thinking about? David asked, following my gaze. Just how funny life is, I said. How the worst things sometimes lead to the best things. What do you mean? I looked up at my husband, this man who had given me everything I never knew I needed. If Tyler hadn't been so cruel to me in high school, I might never have become the person I am today. I might never have been strong enough to build a life worth living, and I definitely wouldn't have been sitting in that coffee shop the day you spilled my latte. David considered this. So in a weird way, we owe our marriage to Tyler's teenage stupidity? In the weirdest way possible, I agreed. He laughed and dipped me dramatically. Remind me to thank him in my father of the groom speech. Don't you dare, I said, but I was laughing too. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, David asked me something that had clearly been on his mind. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd known who I was from the beginning? If you'd known Tyler was my son? I thought about it honestly. Probably nothing, I admitted. I probably would have run the other way. And now, I looked at this man who had changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined, who had shown me what real love looked like, who had given me a family even if it came with complications. Now I know that the best things in life are usually the ones that scare you the most. Today, 3 years after our wedding, Tyler calls me every Sunday. Sometimes we talk about work, sometimes about Rebecca, sometimes about David. Occasionally we talk about high school, but not in the way you might expect. We talk about how it shaped us, how it taught us both different lessons about kindness and cruelty, about the power we have to hurt or heal each other. Tyler has become a leader in anti-bullying programs at local schools. He speaks to teenagers about the long-term consequences of their actions, about how words can follow someone for decades. Rebecca tells me the kids love him because he doesn't lecture them. He just tells them his story and lets them draw their own conclusions. He's good at it, she told me over coffee last week. The kids trust him because he's been where they are. David retired last year, and we spend our mornings hiking, our afternoons reading, and our evenings cooking elaborate meals together. Tyler and Rebecca come over every Friday for dinner, and we've started a tradition of playing board games afterward. Tyler's competitive streak has evolved into something more playful, and watching him and David argue over Monopoly rules is one of my favorite things in the world. Sometimes, when I'm cleaning up after these dinners, I think about 16-year-old me crying in her bedroom, convinced that Tyler Morrison was right, that she would die alone and forgotten. I wish I could go back and tell her that someday, Tyler Morrison would be arguing with her husband about whether Boardwalk is worth the investment, while his wife helps her load the dishwasher and plan their upcoming vacation to Italy. I wish I could tell her that the boy who tried to define her worth would someday introduce her to others as, "My stepmother, Sarah. She's incredible," with genuine pride in his voice. I wish I could tell her that sometimes the people who hurt us the most become the ones who help us understand our own strength. But mostly, I wish I could tell her that Tyler Morrison was wrong about everything except one thing. She would not be forgotten. She would be remembered, cherished, and loved by a family she never could have imagined. A family that included, impossibly, Tyler Morrison himself.